Hello and welcome. Today we are going to dive a little bit into one of my favourite parts of the organ that I am restoring, and that is the pedal 16-foot trombone rank. Now, if you're not familiar with organs, then there's a few things there that I need to explain. On a pipe organ, we have the keyboards that you play with your hands, but we also have an enlarged keyboard that you play with your feet, and these are called the pedals. So we have a pedal board that is arrayed like a normal keyboard, except obviously the keys are bigger, and you play them with your feet. Pipes that belong to the pedal division tend to be a lot bigger, and they are the bass notes of the organ. In this organ, we have two ranks of pipes at the moment that are dedicated to the pedal division, and one of them is the 16-foot trombone. Now, the size 16 feet refers to the pitch that the pipes play at. In this case, they are an octave lower than written pitch, and so 16-foot pitch means that the lowest pipe plays the equivalent pitch as bottom C on a normal piano keyboard. So in this case, the longest pipe is about 4.5 meters tall, and that's going to be a little bit of a challenge to fit inside the room that I'm rebuilding this pipe organ into. So the very tops of the pipes are going to be bent over at 90 degrees so as to fit them under the ceiling that I have here. What you might think of when you hear the word trombone, it doesn't really align with the reality of what we call trombones in a pipe organ context. Firstly, this rank is made out of wood, and secondly, it uses a reed. But the function of the rank in the pipe organ is to add a lot of volume, a lot of clarity and diction to the pedal notes. If you use non-reed pipes, what we would call flue pipes, then you don't always get a lot of clarity, a lot of diction when you're playing very low notes. Using pipes that have a reed adds that sort of clarity. So it serves the same function as a bass trombone in a brass band or a tuba in an orchestra or something like that. Adds a lot of girth to that low down sound. Now, this was something that needed to be done to this organ because when it was relocated in the 1980s, they got rid of one of the other pedal ranks that would have added a lot of the sound and clarity down there, so they added this trombone at the same time. The trombone rank is what we call a chorus reed. It's not a rank that you would typically hear by itself in a solo context. It is something that is usually played in combination or in chorus with all the other sounds. So by itself, it doesn't sound brilliant. I mean, I like the sound personally, but it's not a sound that you would use to play a solo or anything. But when you've got the full organ and you add the trombone to it, it adds a tremendous effect to it. And unfortunately, I can't demonstrate that to you now because I literally only have that rank up and running. But it is something that I'm looking forward to sharing with you as the rebuild continues. Moving on to the pipes themselves, we have two main parts of the assembly. We have this. This is the resonator, what you might also call the pipe. This takes the sound from the other component that I'll show you, and it amplifies it, and it sort of changes the characteristic of the sound. Without this, it sounds a bit like a duck call. And then the other component is this. This is where the vibrations get made. Air enters the bottom of this. There's a little valve here that regulates the amount of air that can go through its bottom hole. And then the rest of this assembly is taken up by this. And this is a reed. Now, I'm actually going to show you one of the bigger ones so you can see it a little bit more easily. But these together form top F of the rank. So there are 30 pipes. They reach from about 2.5 octaves from C to F. And this is the smallest of them. So they get, as I say, pretty big pretty quickly. These pipes are made in Germany, so I have what you could argue is German-made trombones, and I have 30 of them. Sadly, none of them are things that I could play in a band context because each pipe only plays one note. But I'll get one of the bigger reeds, and we'll have a little bit of a look at what that does. So this is the assembly for the low C pipe. This is 16-foot C. And it produces a pitch, as I say, about the same as low C on a grand piano. There are a few components here. We have this part here. This is the part of the housing also known as the block, and this sits in the top of the wooden assembly and just holds all the components together. This little flange here is what the resonator will slot onto, and then we have a felt to absorb the bottom of the resonator. This part here is a tuning wire. It extends through this assembly and has a little bar across it, and you push this up and down to define the amount of the reed that is allowed to vibrate. That's one of the two ways that we tune these pipes. So we can tune them by shortening the amount of the reed that's left to vibrate, and we also tune them by adjusting this here, which covers up this slot, and that defines the overall speaking length of the resonator, and that's the other way that we tune these pipes. The other components of this assembly is we have the reed that goes along here. This is slightly curved, so it doesn't actually stay in contact with this. So air rushes in, it pushes this up, and then the natural springiness causes this to vibrate backwards and forwards. This reed's about 1 millimeter thick or so, and it has some weights on the top of it just to give it a little bit more bounce. The part that the reed vibrates against is called a shallot. Now this is a piece of brass. It's slightly tapered, and this piece of brass is perfectly flat on the top, and it has a cutout, and so the reed vibrates backwards and forths. It hits this. Those vibrations are channeled through the inner part of the shallot, which communicates with this flange, and then those vibrations are amplified by the resonator. The reed is then held in place by a little wedge of wood that goes up here. So a close-up of this assembly looks like this. Now this block is made out of an alloy of tin and lead. It is quite substantial in terms of weight. It's a couple of kilograms of weight just sitting right there. Fortunately, the trombone is one of the ranks of pipes that doesn't actually need a whole lot of modification. It sits on its own chest. Because that chest was new in the 1980s, it's already direct electric action. I don't need to do anything to reassemble it or modify it in any way. The only thing I do need to do is to modify the bottom 5 pipes so that they fit in the room that I have. The bottom 5 pipes need to be what we call mitered. This is where you take the pipe and you put a 45-degree cut in it, take the top part, rotate that around, and 45 plus 45 equals 90, and then the top will stick out at a right angle. Now this is quite difficult to do because this is tapered. The angle on this side and the angle on that side, if you were to put a 45-degree angle with reference to this surface, it's not going to be 45 degrees with reference to the other surface. So there's a lot of faffery that needs to take place. Right now, I have all of the pipes done apart from the bottom 4. So that is, so what I have is E through to F, 2 octaves and 1 note higher. But we can play that, as you will have seen in a previous video. So a quick sound sample of what this rank sounds like now.